there were 60,000 members in the union at the time. No one would ever actually go up and pick up one of those copies of the financial documents and take it home with them. So the culture was, yes, we put it all in front of you, but if you were to pick one up, you were essentially telling all the leadership you didn't trust them.
Wow.
So the culture throughout
So interesting.
the period John was president was, yeah, it's right out there, but don't ever ask for, don't ever pick up a copy. And finally, they had all these problems in the local because some fool picked a copy up.
Right.
You know,
Okay,
then it turned out Gus Pavona was making $430,000 a year, and blah 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 blah. But so organizational process is not, and culture is not unimportant. I guess that's the point by reference. And I don't know that some of the GA stuff and whatever may seem crazy, but some of the stuff that we've had in unions and community organizations is pretty whack too. So I'm actually more open to people trying some things and seeing what works and seeing what the synthesis ends up being, and even looking. I spend a lot of time encouraging people to get past. Hey, if I can get past Acorn dying, you can get past Acorn dying. So let's look at what we have to learn from that. There were many things I think Acorn did right, including what it tried to do. But there's some things that you'd have to do differently. Not even because Acorn did them wrong, like when we were talking. I do think, I've never been a believer in federations, but I think a new formation would be a federated formation. It would have to be harder to kill in a sort of systematic way Acorn was able to be killed. In a federation, you're lopping off one piece, not the heart. They finally figured out sort of how to go right to the nexus of it, and the sort of very complicated structure. And what's the most ironic to me, and I think Bill's an attorney, so he knows that, there's no big corporation that doesn't have 500 different sub-corporations and property and LLCs or whatever. And, if you can't have a lawyer who doesn't tell you, segregate your risk, have some parts this, some parts that, or whatever. On the Glenn Beck and the right wing, the fact that we had whatever, 200 and something corporations housed out of one address and out of New Orleans. This was like, to them, to the Tea Party people, this was like the height of something crazy, crazy bad. Well, that's just the way how do you run a big operation without multiple, corporate entities between the media operations and the housing operations and the unions? Sure, the buildings, they all had different corporate structures. So yeah, I think you'd have to do a federation to make it harder to do what was done in Congress, which was essentially didn't affect the money of Acorn, and Acorn wasn't getting a direct stream of federal money, but sort of discolored the water, put reputational poison out there so that your other donors also ran. And it would be harder to do if you had more names you were operating on as well. But there's a lot of that. Other questions?
What's your favorite radio station or radio program? Radio program.
I'm still. I don't get the opportunity to listen to much radio, to tell you the truth.
You don't listen to Democracy Now!, you don't listen to alternative radio, you don't listen to Free Speech Radio News, you don't listen to Pacifica regularly. Shame on you.
Ask me about
what
something
is your
country
classroom?
western, and I can probably do a couple of bars with you. That's,
Do you like old Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings?
I know a lot about their songs. Yeah. I know all the songs. Some girls like you and some girls don't. And, you end up putting different things on the radio sometimes to not have to be immersed in the work 24/7. So, and WWOZ is a very popular radio station in New Orleans. And, I listen to them. And out of UNO, they have my daughter is a big All Things Considered person, and so if ever I'm driving her truck, I find NPR and those shows just fantastic. And they had a series for a while about, sort of what we learn in the world. We did one on the most important thing for an organizer was learn how to listen. We discontinued it, but, I have a lot of respect for what they did, and clearly they got beat up like Acorn did, so now I love NPR. Yeah.
Because of the Republican attack on PBS.
They're all, those are all my people now.
I used to, I'd just like to share how Occupy has affected me, and maybe you could respond a little bit.
Sure.
I used to feel the divide was social ethic versus individual ethic. You know, primarily a market, individual market dynamics versus a social bureaucratic dynamics. I thought, that's what I thought was the paradigm to look at. Not making two judgments about it. I think a little more towards bureaucratic, but that doesn't matter. Just that paradigm. The anarchists have really affected me a great deal in Occupy, which I never really had much contact with until now. Some, but not much. There I see a sense of a mutuality dynamics, cooperative dynamics. Like we have co-ops, you know, there's co-ops all over the country.
I deliberately look for this place.
Yeah,
as a
well,
co-op.
you know, they're just going crazy.
I'm not going to miss the wave when it comes in.
They're going crazy. Now, I would just like your take on that triad, so to speak.
Personally, I'm not an anarchist. Obviously, I build organizations.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's why
for a living,
yeah,
and
right.
you know, as an avocation and a conviction. But I've been following for some time this. I think the most successful ideology within young people coming out in sort of that 18 to 28 demographic has been hugely affected by the activity in anarchists, from the globalization movement to the Seattle stuff to whatever. I think they've been seen as sort of a quicker and easier way to take action. I think it's a lazy approach. I mean, it's actually very hard to build an organization, and it's very hard to build leadership, and it's very hard to build mass support. So I understand. I understand its appeal, and I'm somewhat critical of the appeal for reasons that have to do with what I'm trying to.
Let me share what I'm getting from it. It seems to be a revolution of how people live, more than an association of a big organization. The power of it seems to be, I want a neighborhood garden. I want to eat lower on the food chain. It's more of a revolution of how we live than a revolution of an organization. What would you say to that?
Yeah, we'll have to see how it works out.
Are you voting one way or the other?
I'm not likely to vote for. I think
huh?
it'll have tremendous impact on those people, as the youth culture and the hippie period and a number of other things had huge impact on us. We may not have jumped on that bus and taken the trip, but there's nobody who came from my generation. I graduated from high school in 1966, and the apocryphal story of me becoming an organizer was that I dropped out of college and I hadn't dropped out. I'd gone back after dropping out and was looking for a summer job, and my ex-wife at that time got tickets to go on a bus to some rock concert, and that weekend that we were supposed to go, I then had a chance to go organize for the Welfare Rights Organization in Springfield, Massachusetts. So I hitchhiked down to Springfield, and the bus turned out to be going to Woodstock. So it went one way, the youth culture went one way, and Wade went this way.
Yeah,
and,
right.
So that was my apocryphal story until somebody who was on the bus turned out to be a reporter for the LA Times, and at the whatever 40th or something anniversary of Woodstock tracked me down because he'd been on that very bus that I didn't catch and remembered it. And it turned out there was about a month or two difference, and I just sort of, obviously fell in love with that story that was somewhat more than the reality. The reality was I'd already made the decision to go to Springfield. We had a big action, and I didn't go back to pick up the tickets that Lee had bought. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What time is it, Marielle?
6:55.
So one of the things I've learned as an organizer, and it's sort of become almost a religious principle to me, is that after something goes about 90 minutes, I think people get dangerous and cranky. And I've seen this since I was a kid. So I'm a big believer if you say 5:30 to 7, and even if you don't really start at 5:30, that as it gets towards that period, it's just always a good thing to get to where you're going to go, give people an option to either,